Let's allow the sound of the bowl to bring us to center. I'll ring it once. I invite you to take 3 deep breaths. And on the in-breath, say to yourself, infinite love. And on the out-breath, here, now. And we'll begin by opening ourselves up, reminding ourselves to open up. So say after me, I open my mind. I open my heart. And I open my whole being to Spirit. We have our wonderful practitioner, Susan Einhorn, today, who's going to be doing our opening prayer.
And good morning to all on our YouTube and our Zoom. Yes, we're having fun today. And so with that, I just taken a breath, and I am informed and remembering that life that is always meeting me, always present. And I call that life the source, the divine, the beloved God, the presence. All of it, for it is all there is. And it is that source creating like a spring with water flowing up always, always, unending. That I am being given life, nourishment, support. All that I need is brought forth into being from this source. And because it is the truth for me, it is the truth for all that is created. For it is creating itself, creating everything from itself. It is more than an it or a thing. It is a happening. It is something that is always active, always functioning, always creating, always becoming. And therefore I know that all that I am is always active, always becoming. And that the world that I live in is God's world. And that my journey is a path or a road that is created for me. And I know that every path is created for that specific individual. For there is a way in which the gifts of Spirit are forthcoming to all in that journey. And that my journey allows me to choose whatever shows up, and I might meet my challenges in an open way, or I may meet my dreams and claim them. And whatever I choose is good. It is for me in that moment. And I know that because the moment is an eternity, it is always bigger than my vision, longer and deeper, and allows me an unlimited possibility in each moment. And I'm so grateful for this, that there are no restrictions in this life, that it is only my attitude, my mental belief or perception that will limit me. And so as I breathe in, I claim this life as mine, God-given, my birthright, to express and explore and expand all that I can be. And as I breathe out, I release limitation, old beliefs. And with great gratitude, I release this, knowing it is the truth of me, it is the truth of all. For all are blessed, and all is well. And this life and this journey is great. And so knowing that Spirit has already brought this into being, I release it and claim it, and so it is.
So we are playing with a theme this month of Exodus. Exodus, moving from one level of consciousness to another, heading out on the road. And so I got my walking staff, I got my backpack with the 10 essentials in it. Well, some of the 10 essentials. And I want to start off with a quote from somebody who knows about the road. And he's talking to his nephew, and he says, "It's a dangerous business, Frodo, going out your door. You step onto the road, and if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to." And that's from the Lord of the Rings being spoken by Bilbo. I'm going to place this over here. I have to say to the altar team, you're both here, I'm concerned about this thing. It seems that pumpkin seems to be getting pulled over. It's live, isn't it? It's not going to come and grab it around my legs, is it? I'm watching it. No promises. Well, that's the road. There are no promises. So that's perfect. So with a quote like that, with a reminder like that, with an awareness like that about the road, some might say, let's stay home and play it safe. Okay? But the road is the journey of life. The road is the journey of life, and we are all on it. Nudge your neighbor and say, you're on the road right now. And even if you're hiding in some dark, safe hole, you're on the road. Helen Keller said life is either a daring adventure or nothing. Security does not exist in nature, nor do people as a whole experience it. Avoiding danger is no safer in the long run than exposure. You know, I have a friend of mine who mentions wanting to be like an ostrich and hiding their head in the sand. And I looked that up this week because I was curious, and ostriches don't hide their head in the sand. It's a myth. It's not real. I got a lot of reasons why they put their head in the sand, but it's not to hide. And we won't go into an ostrich lesson at the moment. But we are called, we have to engage with life, or life itself. And this road that we're on is life itself, both internally and externally. We're on a road that's a journey within and a journey without. And it calls us, life calls us to journey on its road. And it's a road that is exciting and boring and challenging and humiliating to the ego, which reminds me always of Michael Beckwith's, "A bad day for the ego is a good day for the soul." Okay? It's inconvenient, it's uncomfortable, and it's absolutely required for us to grow into the beings we came here to be. Take a breath. The writer Anais Nin said, "And the day came when the risk to remain tight in a bud was more painful than the risk it took to blossom." Life is a process of becoming, a combination of states that we have to go through. Living never wore one out so much as the effort to not live. Living never wore someone out as much as the effort to not live. So we might as well get out onto the road, yes? Because guess what? We're already there. And the road is where we learn and where we grow. We don't really learn or know something by sitting home and reading books about it. Sorry. I know. We learn about it by engaging. We learn about it by doing it. You know, I can watch Heather play the guitar all I want to, and I can read about playing guitar, but until I pick one up and start strumming and start taking lessons and start learning something, I know nothing about playing guitar. I remember when I was in my 20s, I discovered Zen, and I read all the books on Zen, and I taught myself meditation, and I thought I was really good at Zen, right? And then I went and studied with a Zen priest, and I remember the very first class I went in thinking that I knew so much about Zen, and I walked out realizing I knew nothing about Zen. It was humiliating. Not in a bad way. He was fine, but it was taking the ego and saying what you thought you were so expert in and so knew so much about, you really knew nothing about. And so the road has the process of doing that for us. And the road has phases we need to know. And there's an initial crossing through a passage from home, and it's a crossing from which we can't return. See, the word Exodus I mentioned last week is from the Greek, which means a way or a path out. But the Greek translation is actually from an Aramaic word, makana, which means going out without thought of return. In other words, a one-way ticket. Life asks, do you really mean it? Do you really mean it? All heroes' journey stories begin with a passage crossing something, stepping out onto the road, often with a small step followed by a large one. In the myth of Parsifal, who's the knight who's in search for the Grail, he sees the knights and is told to go to King Arthur's court. That's the small step. He has to get it. His mother blesses him, even though she's lost her husband and his two older brothers as knights. And she brought him way out in the woods to where he'd never see knights again, because she didn't want him to be a knight. So, of course, the universe sends 5 knights riding by, and he goes, ooh, I want to be that. We can run, but we cannot hide. Okay. So he's told to go to King Arthur's court, and then he is told the large step, which is take the Red Knight's livery. The Red Knight had just come through King Arthur's court, plundered it, beat the crap out of everybody, and walked off with whatever he wanted to. And this kid, bumpkin kid, from the sticks, is told, go out and take the Red Knight's livery. That's the big step, which, by the way, he does. In Exodus, there's a passage through the sea, and I'm going to disappoint some people here. Cecil B. DeMille, Charlton Heston, I'm sorry, there was not this big parting of the waters and walls. In fact, if you actually read the book, they crossed about 185 miles north of the main body of the Red Sea. Did you know that? No. Because it makes a much more dramatic story. Where they were really crossing was the very tip of the Gulf of Suez, and just north of the tip of the Gulf of Suez is Bitter Lakes. And we're kind of familiar with that here, aren't we, in Olympia? Because we got an inlet from Puget Sound that comes, and then over here is Capitol Lake. And if we cross the sea every day, anytime we cross the Fifth Avenue Bridge, right? But what it is the tide goes out, and so the land starts to become passable. And that's where they crossed. And if you read the book, it says the miracle is that God sent an easterly wind all night long to blow, which basically meant it kind of dried off the surface so they could cross. And it also kind of moved the waters a little bit more than it would on a still day. You learned something new today, right? Whew. There's an interesting line, though, in Exodus, that the Israelites went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters were a wall unto them on their right and on their left. So first understand that the Aramaic writers use metaphor, hyperbole, and exaggeration. Can we just say it? Okay, if you ever read the Bible, especially the Old Testament, okay, you know, the nostrils of God, breathe fire, whatever, all that stuff. And in Aramaic, any body of water is known as a sea. We might, for those, you might remember that this week during the heavy rains, many of us could have looked out at our streets and said, there was a sea running from wall to wall down the street. Yes? Yes? Okay. So that's a sea, any body of water. So the wall on either side means two things. First, it's protection from the Egyptians. The Egyptians were right behind them, right? They camped overnight. There was a fog. It's called a cloud, but there was a coastal fog, or maritime fog, whatever you call that. Sorry, that they couldn't see exactly where they were. But the two waters, the very tip of the Gulf of Suez and Bitter Lakes, formed a wall so that the Egyptians couldn't flank them on either side. And then the second definition of the wall, because the word that's used for wall is the same as the wall of a city, it's a protective wall, is it's also a guide. It says this is the way to go, and it's the only way to go. Don't wander. How many of us need that wall? Right? You know, if you don't keep your feet, there's no knowing where you might be swept off to. Keeping your feet is staying centered, is listening to the guidance. We often need guidance to not wander off the path on our journey through life. And then another consistency in the hero's journey story is that at the start, the hero is often aided by supernatural help. Gods, wizards, unexpected support comes from all sorts of directions. But as the hero journeys, they start to gain more wisdom, more power, and more of the other attributes they need, and they start to become self-supportive. The hero becomes more self-empowered. We on our journey, as we do it, as we learn our lessons, as we gather information, as we gather experience, start to become a little more self-empowered. That's probably why you're sitting in this place instead of the place, the church or non-church that you grew up in, right? Is because you said, no, there's something else out there, and I'm going to go find it. I'm going to find some people that agree with that are somewhat in alignment with that. And so the heroine aligns himself or herself with a source that is already and always present within them, but oftentimes unrecognized and untapped into until they get put into a situation where they absolutely need to. We oftentimes don't know our strength, our power, until something challenges us to bring that power out. I forgot who it was that first said it, but that we're like tea bags. We don't really know what we're made of until we're put into hot water. Okay? And so the hot water, if we will view that as, instead of, oh, what's the world doing to me? It's, what is the world calling me to be and trying to bring out of me as my strength, as my power, as the glory and brilliance of who I am? There's all sorts of examples. In the movie The Matrix, Neo gets over his insecurity to save Morpheus and Trinity. He's got to save them. He's got to do something, or they're going to die. Bilbo and Frodo in The Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit both have their moments of stepping into their own power. The Israelites finally moved from dependence just on Moses to becoming the great people of God that they were destined to be. And none of this comes about easily. Sorry. As Boromir said, no, you don't just walk into mortar. Nobody just walks into mortar. One does not simply walk into mortar. The journey is a journey of learning and growing. Along the way in the Exodus story, the Ten Commandments come along as this is a way of living that's different from maybe what you knew in Egypt. We get guidance for how do I learn differently. Parsifal must learn how to become a knight. Neo in The Matrix goes through extensive training. The hobbits learn from Gandalf, Aragorn, and others. And Science of Mind, which we're in, is a way of living. That's why we call ourselves a center for spiritual guessing or spiritual, just kind of mentally, whatever. No, it's a center for spiritual living. Science of Mind is a way of living. Things like the Four Agreements. I know the kids today are studying the Four Agreements. Is a way of living. And usually the hero must fail a few times. Sorry. Before understanding the why behind the lessons. And become humble enough to follow the guidelines. See, the road ultimately demands humility. Demands us letting go of our self-righteous, I know how to do everything ego. We've seen little kids where, it's just like, let me help you tie your shoes. I know how to do it. And a lot of us as adults are still to some degree doing that. Not necessarily about our shoe tying, but about life, yes? The road requires or demands humility because believing we already know it all will get us or others near us killed in the stories. And this is the purpose of the Zen saying, by the way, if you meet the Buddha on the road, kill him. The Buddha is that idea of I know it all. And we have to let go of that. We have to release that. So the road is ultimately our inner journey. Even if it appears to take place externally, the hero's journey is, again, an inward and outer journey. And finally, heroes always mess up, on the journey. How many of us have messed up on our journey? Nope. Okay, Buffy has never. Everybody else has. And it's in this very messing up and then in dealing with the results that we grow, that we learn what we truly need to learn to rise to our higher self. If we, the hero, get defensive, get self-righteous, get self-protective, get rigid, the learning is lost until we gain the real treasures of humility, compassion, love, and wisdom. That's what the journey is about. We must eventually learn that our journey is not for our personal gain, but for the expansion of life itself. The 40 years in the desert represents the dying off of a generation that is stuck in the past, in the old ways, I would rather be in my own bed back in slavery than be out here in the desert. You know, if you ever read the book of Exodus, it's like, they whine and complain their way across the desert. Right? There's this change, they wander off to worship other gods, etc., etc., etc. And they try to make it all about themselves and their glory and their magnificence, as well as their fears, their self-protections, and their limitations. We're not like them. Not, you guys aren't, but them. You know people, them out there, right? Okay, so I kind of know some of that within myself. So we reach the promised land for future generations. We seek the Grail to free the wounded Grail King. In the Parsifal legend, the question that he ultimately has to ask is, who does the Grail serve? And finally realize it's not for him. It's to serve humanity. Our growth isn't to serve us. It'll lift us, it'll bless us, but really we're here, how can I use this gift to serve more people? How can I use this gift? How can I use all that I am to serve people, to serve humanity? How can I free the world of the abusive ring of power? So we have a dream of freedom from discord and suffering for all. That is the science of mind dream, is that Ernest Holmes articulated. We dream of a time when all are free of suffering and discord. That is why we do what we do. Not to get nicer cars and nicer houses and better relationships. That's all nice. But what we are really here about is, how can we transform the world? What you and I are here individually for is, how can I shift the consciousness of the world to a more loving, more humble, more wise, more caring place? And I hope you're willing to be on that road, on that journey. So we have 3 practices this week that I want to invite you to. Number 1, ask within, where am I being called to set off on the road? Oftentimes we know there's a road in front of us, but we're just kind of like, I don't want to look at that. So often the hero first refuses the journey, right? Okay. So this is, where am I being called? Let's just say, okay, I get it. I'm supposed to be on the road. I already am on the road, I just don't know it. So where am I really being consciously called to set off on the road? And then secondly, what is the Red Sea that I must move through? What is the barrier? What is the crossing that I must do, the one-way ticket that I'm going to take and not come back from? What is that I must do? And am I willing to ask for support in going through it? Because here's the other thing about the hero's journey. The hero is never alone. The hero never does the journey by himself or herself, right? They've got support from other people. They've got support from the infinite presence. They have support all along the way. So am I willing to be supported? Am I willing to ask for support? Am I willing to look for support? So what's the Red Sea that I need to move through, and am I willing to ask for support moving through it? And then the third question is, where in my life am I already on the road, consciously on the road? And what do I need to learn to move forward? What do I need to learn to move forward? Are you willing to play with those practices this week? Wonderful. I'm going to close with a reading from the Joyous Living Journal. Sherry's laughing because I told the council that I was going to read from this because Carrie, our council president, read this the other day. And it says, God is not a word. This is kind of going to move you into the idea of that. God is not a word. You can think about music all you want to. It's not going to make music. You can think about being an athlete for years. It's not going to happen unless you get out onto the field. You can say and think words about God, but as long as it remains a mental practice, it's not going to be experienced in your world. You must become that which you envision for it to be a reality in your life. God is not a word, it's an experience. And I would say that about life and about the road and about this fanny pack that's dripping down off my rear end here. God is not a word, it's an experience. Thinking about spirit is not spirit. Spiritual statements are nice for pointing you in a good direction, but they are not spirit. In Zen, there's a saying, do not mistake the finger pointing at the moon for the moon. Don't get lost in giving your power away to books with wonderful words. You still have to live them. Your true understanding won't come from books. It will be attained only by consciously connecting with the source and being it. If you want spirit, be still and let it operate through you as you. If you want to have that connection, get on the road. Don't just think about the road. We have an affirmation. Join me in this. Perfection is static, and I am in progress. I travel the road of life with clarity and humility, knowing I am fully supported along the way. Once more, perfection is static, and I am in progress. I travel the road of life with clarity and humility, and knowing I am fully supported along the way. And so it is.